At the restaurant, my daughter-in-law slapped my plate to the floor and shouted, "Witch! You should have stayed home." Everyone stared, and my son said nothing. On Monday, a letter from the attorney arrived. Her bank account had been locked. What if everything you believed about your family, about your son's love, was just a carefully constructed lie? That night, at a fancy restaurant, my daughter-in-law didn't just shatter a plate on the floor. She utterly demolished my world, and my son, my only son, just watched. The air in Bellini's, an elegant Italian restaurant typically alive with soft music and joyful chatter, suddenly went deathly still. All I could hear was the piercing crack of porcelain against marble, the sickening scrape of shards across the polished floor, and the echo of my own heart breaking into a million pieces. Every single eye in that room, it felt like, burned into me. My daughter-in-law, Candace, stood over my table, her face a mask of pure contempt, while Michael, my son, my flesh and blood, just sat there. His gaze was fixed, not on me, not on his furious wife, but on a pristine linen napkin. "Mom, maybe you should go," he mumbled eventually, his voice barely a whisper, still unable to meet my eyes. 60 years old, and I'd never felt more invisible, more utterly insignificant. Just hours earlier, I had been overflowing with hope. It was my birthday, and Michael had actually called me to invite me to dinner. After months of unanswered calls and hurried, hollow conversations, I truly believed things were finally changing between us. I'd spent hours getting ready, carefully choosing my best dress and clasping the pearl necklace my late husband, Arthur, had given me 5 years before he passed. I arrived at Bellini's, a place I couldn't really afford, clutching a small photo album I'd lovingly put together. It was filled with pictures of Michael growing up. I imagined us, just two of us, looking through it together over dessert, maybe laughing, maybe tearing up. Silly me. So incredibly naive. From the moment I sat down, a thick, suffocating tension hung in the air. Candace barely acknowledged my existence, her fingers flying across her phone screen. Michael was a bundle of nerves, constantly checking his watch. Still, I tried. God, how I tried. "How are the children?" I asked, my voice perhaps a little too eager. I was desperate for any news of my grandchildren, Sophie and Leo. I hadn't seen them in almost 8 months. "They're fine," Candace snapped, her eyes still glued to her phone. I persisted, a fake smile plastered to my face, masking the ache in my chest. "I brought a little gift for Sophie's birthday next week. I hope she'll like it." That's when Candace finally looked up, her gaze cutting into me, cold as ice. "We already told you, Eleanor. Sophie has too many toys. She doesn't need your cheap trinkets." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Candace, please." He started, a weak attempt. "No, Michael," she hissed, her voice rising. "I'm tired of her trying to buy our children's affection when she was such a terrible mother to you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gasped. I don't understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You never do you?" Candace sneered, her voice now dangerously loud. "Always playing the victim. Poor Eleanor. All alone in that big house. Maybe if you hadn't been so controlling, Michael wouldn't have needed therapy." Therapy? This was the first I'd ever heard of such a thing. My head snapped to my son, a jumble of confusion and searing pain. "Michael." He still wouldn't meet my gaze. "It's nothing, Mom." "It's not nothing," Candace insisted, turning on him. "Tell her how she ruined your childhood. Tell her how she never let you be your own person." The waiter arrived then, an awkward, silent specter, carefully placing our plates as Candace's tirade continued. I sat there, utterly frozen, my mind reeling, trying desperately to process what was even happening. When the waiter finally retreated, I tried to reach for Michael's hand. "Honey, I don't know what." That's when Candace exploded. She shot up, snatched my plate of pasta, rich, red marinara and all, and threw it to the floor. "You witch. You should never have come." The crash was deafening, silencing every last whisper in the restaurant. I felt the collective stare of every stranger burn into me, hot sauce splattering across my best dress, soaking into my shoes. "Michael," I pleaded, my voice cracking, tears already streaming. "Michael, please." But my son, That little boy I'd raised all on my own after Arthur died of cancer when Michael was just 12. The boy I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college. He just sat there, silent, ashamed. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my bones, that his shame wasn't for Candace. It was for me. I grabbed my purse, my hands trembling so violently I could barely stand. "I'm sorry to have ruined your evening," I managed to choke out, clutching at the last vestiges of my dignity. Then I walked out, head held high, even as the tears blurred my vision. In the deserted parking lot, I collapsed into my car and just sobbed. Through the restaurant's panoramic window, I could see them. They were still there, continuing their meal as if nothing had happened, as if I had never existed. I drove home to the house Arthur and I had bought 40 years ago. The house where Michael took his first steps, where he had his first kiss on the porch, where he had told me he was going to marry Candace. It was a house that suddenly felt vast, empty, suffocatingly full of ghosts. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Arthur's old armchair, surrounded by photo albums and memories, picking apart every single moment of my life, desperate to understand where I'd gone wrong. Had I been controlling? Had I truly ruined Michael's childhood? The questions gnawed at me relentless until the first hint of dawn. By morning, though, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The tears had dried, leaving behind a stark, icy clarity I hadn't felt in years. I picked up the phone, my fingers dialing a number I hadn't touched in a long, long time. "Daniel," I said, my voice steady, no longer trembling. "It's Eleanor Hartman. I need your help. Immediately." On Monday, Candace received a letter from Daniel, my lawyer. Her account, the one she thought was hers, had been frozen. What my son and his wife didn't know, what I had meticulously kept secret for years, out of a misguided respect for their perceived independence, was about to change absolutely everything. 3 days after that devastating dinner, I sat across from Daniel Wilson in his sleek office. The cool leather of the chair against my back was a stark contrast to the burning resolve in my heart. I watched him, a man I'd known for 40 years, since he was a fresh-faced lawyer, and I a young wife helping Arthur build his business, as he carefully reviewed the documents I'd brought. "Eleanor, you're sure about this?" Daniel asked, peering at me over his reading glasses, a hint of concern in his gaze. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," I replied, my voice steadier, stronger, than it had been in years. Daniel nodded slowly, a knowing understanding in his eyes. "It's going to cause quite a stir." "I'm counting on it," I said, a flicker of something cold and determined in my own eyes. What Michael and Candace didn't know, what I had carefully hidden away out of some misguided desire not to appear boastful, was that I wasn't just Michael's aging mother living on a modest pension. That whole narrative was a carefully crafted facade I had maintained for years. The truth was far, far different. While Arthur had always been the public face of Hartman Construction, I had been its very backbone. After his death, instead of selling the company as everyone expected, as I was advised to do, I quietly took over. Behind the scenes. And I didn't just maintain it. I grew that business into one of the most successful construction firms in the entire state. I lived simply, not out of necessity, but by choice. The big house? I kept it mostly for the memories, not because I needed to impress anyone. But the most significant secret, the beautiful colonial home where Michael and Candace lived with my grandchildren? The home they believed Michael had purchased with his successful career as an investment banker? That house was actually mine. I had bought it 7 years ago. Michael had mentioned wanting to move to that neighborhood, but couldn't quite afford it. "Let me help," I'd offered. "No, Mom," he'd said firmly, "we don't need your money." So, I'd purchased the house through my company and then arranged for them to buy it through a private sale at half its market value. Michael genuinely believed he'd gotten a fantastic deal from a motivated seller. In reality, I still held the deed. And their monthly mortgage payments? They went straight into a trust I'd established for my grandchildren's education. It was all perfectly legal, if somewhat deceptive. I had told myself it was what any loving mother would do, help without wounding pride. But now? Now I wondered if I'd just been enabling the vast emotional distance between us, allowing them to believe they didn't need me, when in fact, they'd been relying on me all along. The letter should arrive today, Daniel said, pulling me from my thoughts. Are you prepared for the fallout? The letter he'd prepared informed Candace that the credit card she'd been using, a card she believed was linked to a special account Michael had set up for her, was actually being supplemented by me. Every single month. When she maxed it out on designer clothes and spa treatments, it was my money covering the difference. Michael had no idea. He just assumed his salary, substantial as it was, could cover their lavish lifestyle. It absolutely could not. I'm prepared, I said, though a part of my heart ached at the storm I was about to unleash. It's time for some honesty in this family. I left Daniel's office and drove to my usual small cafe, a quiet sanctuary where I often went to collect my thoughts. As I slowly sipped my tea, my phone vibrated, an urgent buzz against the quiet. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I answered, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Hello, Michael. Mom, what the hell is going on? His voice was tight, laced with a palpable anger. Candace just got some letter from a lawyer saying her card has been frozen and that I've been supplementing it for the past 5 years. I finished his sentence for him. Yes, that's correct. A beat of stunned silence. Then, a bewildered, what are you talking about, Eleanor? We need to have a conversation, Michael, I stated, my voice firm. About finances. About the truth. About your house. My house? What about my house? I took a deep, steadying breath. The house is in my name, Michael. Always has been. Another long, heavy silence stretched between us. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, him desperately trying to process this impossible information, rearranging the very foundations of what he thought he knew about his life. That's not possible, he finally managed, his voice hollow. I have the mortgage. I make the payments every month. Yes, you do, I confirmed. To a trust one established. I own the house, Michael. I've been helping you financially for years. But after what happened at the restaurant, I've decided it's time for some honesty between us. This is crazy, he sputtered, a fresh wave of anger washing over his words. You're making this up because Candace upset you. Mom, this is exactly the kind of controlling behavior she was talking about. His words stung, a sharp, familiar pain, but I forced myself to remain calm, my resolve hardening. I'll be at home all afternoon. Come by when you're ready to talk. Bring Candace if you want. I'll have all the documentation ready. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, yes, but not from fear. They shook with the tremor of absolute, unshakable resolution. For far too long, I'd allowed myself to be pushed to the furthest margins of my son's life, watching from a desperate distance as Candace systematically poisoned him against me. I'd tried to buy their love, or at the very least, their tolerance, with silent financial support, never daring to ask for acknowledgement. No more. Exactly 2 hours later, the doorbell chimed, a surprisingly gentle sound. I opened it to find Michael standing there alone. His face was a thunderous storm of confusion and raw anger. Prove it, he demanded, pushing past me, uninvited, into the house. I led him to the dining room, where I'd meticulously laid out every piece of evidence. The official deed to their house. Bank statements clearly showing my monthly supplements to Candace's lavish spending. Tax records definitively proving I still owned Hartman Construction. Eleanor. I don't understand, Michael whispered, his voice cracking as he flipped through the stacks of paper, his anger deflating into disbelief. Why would you hide this from me? From us? I sank into a chair across from him, suddenly feeling the full weight of every one of my 60 years. Because you made it very clear you didn't want my help, I said softly, my voice laced with a deep, old pain. But you needed it, Michael. And I just desperately wanted to be a part of your life, even if you never knew it. Michael looked up at me then, and for a fleeting, heartbreaking moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, completely trusting me to fix everything. Does Candace know? He asked, his voice barely audible. No, I confirmed. The letter was the first she's heard of it. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so achingly familiar, so like his father, it made my heart clench. She's furious. She thinks you're trying to punish her for what happened at the restaurant. I held his gaze steadily. And what do you think, Michael? He really looked at me then. Truly looked at me. Perhaps for the very first time in years. I think I don't know my own mother at all. The very next morning, a car door slammed outside my house with enough force to make the windows rattle. I was in the kitchen, calmly preparing my tea, though a knot of dread tightened in my stomach because I knew exactly who had arrived. Eleanor. Michael's voice bellowed, raw with fury, as he burst through the front door without bothering to knock. We need to talk. Now. I took my sweet time adding a spoonful of honey to my tea, bracing myself for the inevitable storm. When I finally walked into the living room, Michael wasn't alone. Candace stood beside him, her face flushed crimson with anger, a designer purse clutched in her hand like a dangerous weapon. Good morning, I said, my voice unnervingly even. Would either of you care for some tea? Eleanor, cut the act. Candace snapped, her eyes blazing. What kind of sick game are you playing? I settled into Arthur's old armchair, regarding them both with a composure I certainly didn't feel. No game, Candace. Just truth. Michael paced the room, agitated, a stark contrast to the humbled expression I'd anticipated after our conversation yesterday. Instead, he seemed almost reinvigorated by a fresh surge of anger. You can't just freeze Candace's accounts, he insisted. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was for her when her card was declined at Nordstrom in front of everyone? I almost let out a cynical laugh. Is that really what concerns you most right now, Michael? Embarrassment at a department store. You're trying to control us. Candace interjected, her voice sharp. Just like you've always tried to control Michael. He told me all about his childhood, how you suffocated him after his father died. I gently placed my teacup back on its saucer, the soft clink a stark counterpoint to the escalating tension. Is that what you truly believe, Michael? That I suffocated you? He stopped pacing, his hands unconsciously curling into fists. You never let me make my own decisions. Every time I wanted to do something, play football, go away for summer camp, even my choice of college, you had to weigh in. I weighed in because I was your mother, I said quietly, looking at him, truly seeing him. A single mother, trying desperately to raise a son and run a business after her husband died. I wasn't perfect, Michael. Far from it. But everything I did was out of love for you. Love. Candace scoffed, a sneer twisting her lips. If you loved him, you wouldn't manipulate him like this. I fixed my gaze on her, unwavering. Like what, exactly? By helping you maintain a lifestyle you can't actually afford? By giving you a house you otherwise couldn't live in? We don't need your money. Michael insisted, his face flushing. I make more than enough. No, you don't, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my sudden, blunt directness. Michael, your salary is substantial. But it's nowhere near enough for the way you and Candace live. The house alone would consume nearly 70% of your take-home pay if you were actually paying market rate for it. I reached for a folder I'd placed on the side table and handed it to him. These are your financial records for the past 5 years. The withdrawals, the credit card bills, the investments that somehow never seemed to mature. He reluctantly took the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he opened it, his earlier anger starting to drain away, replaced by a dawning unease. This is an invasion of privacy. Candace sputtered, but I could clearly see the flash of fear in her eyes, hidden beneath her indignant bluster. Perhaps, I acknowledged, my voice soft but firm. But sometimes, the truth needs to be invasive to finally be heard. Michael slowly flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from anger to confusion, then to pure bewilderment. This can't be right. We don't spend this much on, what is luxury boutique services? Candace quickly moved, almost snatching the folder to close it. It's nothing. Your mother is obviously making things up to come between us. Am I? I asked softly, my eyes on Michael. Michael, I've known for years that Candace has been manipulating you. I stayed silent because I was terrified of losing you completely. Every time I tried to get close, she found a way to push me further away, fabricating stories about things I supposedly said or did. That's not true. Candace's voice rose to a near shriek. Remember when you thought I refused to attend Sophie's christening? I was never invited. Or when you believed I criticized your parenting at Thanksgiving. I wasn't even there. Michael looked between us, doubt now unmistakably clouding his features. Mom. Candace wouldn't. She would, and she did, I continued firmly. And I let it happen because I was afraid. Afraid that if I confronted her, I'd lose any chance of seeing you, or my grandchildren. So instead, I helped silently. I bought your house. I supplemented your income. I kept your lavish lifestyle afloat while Candace systematically cut me out of your lives. Candace suddenly grabbed Michael's arm, her grip tight. She's lying. She's always been jealous of us. She can't stand that you chose me over her. I couldn't help but let out a short, sad laugh. Oh, Candace. It was never a competition. At least, it shouldn't have been. Michael shook off her grip, a new, profound weariness etched into his eyes as he truly looked at his wife. What are luxury boutique services? He repeated, his voice dangerously low. Candace's cheeks flushed a darker crimson. Just some spa treatments, you know. I need to look my best. I remained silent, letting the agonizing moment play out. Michael turned to a specific page in the folder, his fingers slowly tracing down a column of daunting figures. $15,000 in spa treatments in 1 month. His voice was utterly incredulous. There's a very exclusive retreat in Arizona, I supplied quietly, my voice calm. They're known for their discretion and their plastic surgery. The color completely drained from Candace's face. You spied on me? No, I countered. I review all financial transactions related to my accounts. The credit card you've been using is linked to me. Remember? I simply read the statements. Michael turned to another page, his movements becoming more frantic, a dawning horror in his eyes. What about these withdrawals? 10,000 here, 15,000 there. I don't know what those are for, I admitted, my gaze fixed on Candace. Perhaps Candace can explain. The tension in the room was almost suffocating, palpable enough to choke on, as Michael slowly, agonizingly, turned to face his wife, a silent multitude of questions in his eyes. For a moment, Candace looked utterly trapped, cornered. Then, her expression hardened, a mask of defiance replacing her fear. This is ridiculous, she declared, her voice cracking with fury. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on. She snatched her purse, spun on her heel, and stormed towards the door, pausing only to throw a desperate glance back at Michael. Are you coming? Michael stood frozen, the damning folder still clutched in his hands, clearly, agonizingly torn. She's using money to manipulate you, Michael. Candace insisted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. Just like she always has. Don't let her come between us. I remained seated, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The precipice. Would Michael finally see the crushing truth? Or would he once again choose the carefully constructed reality Candace had so meticulously built around him? He looked at me, and for the first time in years, truly saw me, not the controlling mother Candace had convinced him I was, but the woman who had sacrificed absolutely everything for him. Mom, he began, his voice uncertain, fragile. It's your choice, Michael, I said softly, giving him the only thing I could, agency. It always has been. Candace's face contorted with pure, unadulterated fury. If you stay here with her, don't bother coming home. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like a dark thundercloud. Michael looked down at the folder in his hands, then at his enraged wife, then back at me, his mother, his heart clearly tearing in two. I need time to think, he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. Candace's laugh was brittle, bitter, devoid of any humor. Unbelievable. She's done it again. She stormed out, the front door slamming shut behind her with enough force to shake the entire house. Michael and I were left alone in the sudden, echoing silence, the colossal weight of decades of misunderstandings, secrets, and manipulations pressing down heavily between us. I never wanted it to come to this, I said quietly, my voice raw. Then why did you? He asked, sinking onto the couch, suddenly looking utterly exhausted, the fight draining from him. Because sometimes, I replied, meeting his gaze, my own eyes burning with a hard-won conviction. Love means fighting for the truth, even when it hurts like hell. Michael didn't linger after Candace stormed out. He needed space, he'd said, his voice raw. Time to process everything. I understood, profoundly. The very foundations of his life had just been violently shaken. He needed to find his footing again. The next few days were a strange, unsettling limbo. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Michael to return, or for Candace to somehow spin this, twisting the narrative to regain control. I buried myself in work, grateful for the relentless distraction of spreadsheets and client calls. On Thursday afternoon, my doorbell rang, a welcome interruption. I opened it to find Patricia, my oldest and dearest friend, standing on my porch. We'd known each other since high school, long before Arthur, before Michael, before life had carved its complicated, often painful, paths through our hearts. I brought wine, she announced, holding up a bottle of Merlot, a mischievous glint in her eyes. You look like you need it. I couldn't help but offer a watery smile. Patricia had never been one for subtlety. That obvious, huh? She followed me into the kitchen, watching as I fetched glasses. Eleanor, you've been sending all your calls to voicemail for 3 days. Your yard hasn't been fussed over in a week, and... She peered at me closely, her expression softening. You're still wearing the same cardigan you had on when I stopped by on Monday. I glanced down at myself. She was, as always, utterly right. So she continued, pouring generous glasses for both of us, the rich red liquid swirling. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to drag it out of you? I sighed, a long, weary exhalation, and took a fortifying sip of wine before launching into the entire, sordid tale. The restaurant, the shocking revelations about the house and finances, the explosive confrontation with Michael and Candace. Patricia listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled, her brow furrowed with concern. Oh, Eleanor, she said softly when I finally finished, the silence in the kitchen heavy. I knew things were strained with Michael, but I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Neither did I, really, I admitted, a fresh wave of despair washing over me. I've been so busy trying to just stay in their lives that I didn't see how truly toxic it had all become. Patricia took a thoughtful sip of her wine, her gaze distant. There's something you should know, she said finally, her voice hesitant. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach tightened instantly, a cold not forming in my gut. What is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She set her glass down, choosing her words with painstaking care. About 3 years ago, I saw Candace at the Lakeside Hotel. She was with a man. Not Michael. I stared at her, uncomprehending at first. You mean, they were very intimate? Patricia confirmed, her expression grim. I didn't say anything at the time because I wasn't absolutely certain, and I didn't want to cause problems if there was an innocent explanation. 3 years ago, I repeated slowly, the words heavy on my tongue. That's when they were having problems. Michael told me they were seeing a marriage counselor. Patricia grimaced, he said. Patricia shook her head, a sad, knowing look in her eyes. Unless the counselor was a tall man with a goatee who liked to kiss her in hotel lobbies, I don't think that's what was happening. I felt a sickening lurch, not just at the brutal revelation of Candace's infidelity, but at the horrifying realization that I'd been financing it. Those mysterious withdrawals, the spa retreats, had I been paying for her to cheat on my own son? There's more, Patricia said reluctantly, clearly struggling with the words. Last year, at Brenda Wilson's retirement party, Candace had too much to drink. She was bragging to some women about how she had this perfect setup, a husband who didn't question her spending, and a mother-in-law who unwittingly bankrolled her entire lavish lifestyle. She knew, I whispered, utterly horrified, the pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. All this time, she knew I was supplementing their income? Patricia nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. From what she said, she figured it out years ago. She thought it was hilarious. Her words, not mine. That you were trying to be so secretive about it. I felt as if I'd been physically punched, the air knocked from my lungs. All this time, I genuinely believed I was helping Michael, protecting his fragile pride, while ensuring he and his family had the life they wanted. Instead, I'd been played for a fool by Candace, manipulated just as thoroughly, if not more so, than my own son had been. "I need to tell Michael," I said, my hand instinctively reaching for my phone. Patricia gently laid her hand over mine, stopping me. "Are you sure that's wise, Eleanor? He's already dealing with so much." I hesitated, the logical part of my brain warring with the raw, emotional pain. "He deserves to know the truth. All of it." "Yes," Patricia agreed, "but timing matters, Eleanor. He's just had his entire world turned upside down. Maybe give him a little time to adjust before adding this to it." She was right, of course. But before I could respond, my phone rang again. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "It's him," I told Patricia, my heart hammering against my ribs as I answered. "Michael, is everything all right?" His voice was tight, controlled, in a way that immediately sent a jolt of alarm through me. "I need to see you. Can I come over?" "Of course," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm home now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up without saying goodbye. Patricia stood, gathering her purse. "I should go. This sounds like a conversation you two need to have alone." I walked her to the door, profoundly grateful for her steadfast friendship, but absolutely dreading what was about to unfold. "Thank you, Patricia, for the wine and for the truth." She squeezed my hand, her eyes conveying a world of understanding. "Call me later. And Eleanor, be gentle with him. Finding out your life isn't what you thought it was, that's a hard pill to swallow." Michael arrived exactly 20 minutes later, his face haggard and pale, etched with the weariness of a man who hadn't slept in days. "Come in," I said, stepping aside, my heart a complex mix of dread and compassion. "Can I get you any coffee? Something stronger?" "Nothing," he replied, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, as he moved past me into the living room. He paced for a moment, a restless energy about him, then turned to face me, his expression utterly unreadable. "I found something," he said, his voice an odd, hollow monotone. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements, different ones than I had shown him. Account numbers I didn't recognize. Transactions to places I'd never heard of. One name, though, leaped out at me, Bahamas Private Banking Limited. "What is this?" I asked, though a cold, sinking dread in my stomach already told me. "Candace has a secret account," Michael said, his voice cracking slightly, the facade of control beginning to crumble. "She's been transferring money, our money, into it for years. Over $300,000. I sat down heavily, the damning statements clutched in my hand, my own heart aching for him. "Oh, Michael," I whispered, "I'm so sorry." He let out a short, bitter laugh, devoid of any humor. "You're sorry? I'm the one who should be apologizing. You tried to tell me, and I wouldn't listen. I believed her lies about you because it was easier than facing the truth. The truth is, I married someone who never loved me," he said simply, his gaze fixed on some distant point. "Someone who saw us, as nothing but a means to an end." I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that surely it couldn't be that bad. But I couldn't bring myself to lie. Not now, when the brutal, ugly truth was finally breaking through. "There's more," he continued, finally sitting down across from me, the weight of his discoveries palpable. "I hired a private investigator." My eyes widened in shock. "Michael, was that really necessary?" "Yes," he finished firmly, his jaw tight. "I needed to know how deep this went. And Mom," his voice broke then, truly broke. "It's worse than I thought." The investigator hadn't just uncovered the affair Patricia had witnessed. It was multiple relationships, spanning years. Candace had been systematically stealing from them, meticulously building her own nest egg while planning her escape. "She was going to leave," Michael said, his voice hollow, empty. The investigator found emails. "She and this man she's been seeing, they were planning to take the kids and move to the Bahamas once she'd squirreled away enough money." I reached for his hand, and to my surprise, he let me take it, his fingers cold and trembling in mine. "The children," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "How are Sophie and Leo?" Confused, he murmured. Candace told them I'm on a business trip. His eyes filled with unshed tears, reflecting a deep, profound pain. I haven't figured out how to tell them that their mother has been lying to all of us. We sat in silence for a long moment, the crushing weight of everything pressing down on us, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Michael spoke again, his voice gaining a flicker of its old strength. I've been such a fool, Mom. And not just about Candace. He squeezed my hand, a silent plea for forgiveness. I let her convince me that you were the enemy, that you were controlling and manipulative, when all along, it was her. We were both deceived, I said gently, my own tears welling. He shook his head, his gaze fixed on me. No, I should have seen it. The way she isolated me from you, from my friends. The way she always had an explanation for everything, the missing money, the late nights, the constant criticism of you. I wanted so badly to believe we had this perfect life that I ignored all the signs it was falling apart around me. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, to ease his burden, but I knew he needed to work through this himself, to own his part in the blindness. Instead, I asked, "What will you do now?" Michael straightened, a new, steely resolve settling over his features that reminded me so much of Arthur, making my heart ache with bittersweet memory. I've frozen all our accounts. I've contacted a lawyer, not just about a divorce, but about pressing charges for the theft. He hesitated, then, his voice softer, and Mom. I need to ask you a huge favor. Anything, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Can the kids and I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out. For the very first time in years, a fragile flicker of hope fluttered in my chest. Of course, you can, I replied, a warm, reassuring squeeze of his hand. This is your home, too, Michael. It always has been. Later that night, after Michael left to pack some essentials for himself and the children, I stood in my kitchen, staring out at the backyard where he used to play as a little boy. So much had changed. So much searing pain had been inflicted. But maybe, just maybe, from these shattered pieces, we could finally build something new. Something honest. Something real. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Everything okay? I paused, contemplating my words, before replying, no. But I think someday it might be. 2 weeks later, my once quiet, echoing house had been utterly transformed. It was a home again. The joyful sound of children's laughter now echoed through rooms that had been silent for far too long. Sophie, 7, and Leo, 5, brought a chaotic, vibrant energy that somehow both exhausted and invigorated me all at once. Grandma, watch this. Leo called out, executing a wobbly somersault in the living room, nearly taking out the coffee table. Very impressive. I applauded, though my heart did skip a beat at his near miss. Maybe we should practice outside next time, sweetie. Michael appeared in the doorway, looking more rested, more at peace, than he had in days, perhaps years. Leo, what did we say about acrobatics in the house? My grandson sighed dramatically. That we saved them for the backyard. Exactly, Michael affirmed. Why don't you and Sophie go see if the sprinkler is still on? It's hot enough for it. The children didn't need to be told twice, racing outside with whoops of pure, unadulterated excitement. Michael collapsed onto the couch beside me, letting out a long sigh. I honestly don't know how you did it, Mom. Raising me alone all those years. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile, and patted his hand. One day at a time, Michael. Sometimes 1 minute at a time. He nodded, staring out the window where his children were now shrieking with delight as they ran through the sprinkler, their joyous screams carrying clearly through the open windows. The divorce papers are filed, he said quietly, the words heavy. Candace's lawyer reached out yesterday. What does she want? I asked, my voice calm, braced for the worst. Everything, he said with a mirthless, bitter laugh. The house, full custody of the kids, alimony. She's claiming I turned you against her and that you're using your financial position to punish her. I shook my head, entirely unsurprised by her audacity. And what did your lawyer say? That she doesn't have a leg to stand on, he replied, a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. The financial records clearly show she was stealing from us. Plus, he hesitated, then continued, The private investigator found more evidence of affairs. Multiple affairs, Mom. Going back years. I squeezed his hand, saying nothing. Some wounds were still too fresh for platitudes, too raw for easy words. I just keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he continued, his voice heavy with regret. All the times I defended her to you, convinced she was right, and that you were trying to control our lives. I was so blind. We see what we want to see sometimes, I replied gently, my gaze meeting his. Especially when it comes to people we love. He looked at me, truly looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years, the full weight of his apologies in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For believing her lies about you. For shutting you out. For the way she treated you at the restaurant. You don't need to apologize, Michael, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, I do, he insisted, a fierce determination in his tone. I was wrong, and I've spent too many years letting Candace come between us. I felt tears sting my eyes, but they were tears of relief, of a deep, profound healing. Well, I managed, a wobbly smile on my face, we're here now. That's what matters. Outside, Sophie let out a particularly loud shriek as Leo aimed the sprinkler directly at her. Michael smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. They've missed you, he said softly. Even though Candace limited their time with you, they've always talked about Grandma Eleanor and her cookies and her stories. My heart swelled, overflowing with a warmth I hadn't felt in ages. They're remarkable children. They are, he agreed, his gaze tenderly following his kids. And they deserve better than what they've had. A mother who is more interested in her social standing than their happiness. A father who was too wrapped up in maintaining appearances to see what was happening right in front of him. You're being too hard on yourself, I said firmly. You're a good father, Michael. Look at how you've handled all this, protecting them, keeping their routine as normal as possible despite everything falling apart. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise, but a small, hopeful smile played on his lips. I'm trying. It's just a lot. One day at a time, I reminded him, a promise in my words. The very next morning, while Michael took Sophie and Leo to their summer day camp, I made a profound decision. It was time to stop hiding. Time to reclaim my own life. I started with a call to Daniel. I want to go public, I told him, my voice resonating with newfound authority, with my role at Hartman Construction. No more hiding behind Arthur's legacy or male executives. It's time people knew who's really been running things all these years. Daniel didn't sound surprised in the slightest. About time, if you ask me, he chuckled. The board will support you. They know you're the reason the company has thrived. Next, I called Patricia. I'm having a dinner party on Saturday, I announced, a lightness in my tone I hadn't heard in years. Nothing fancy, just a few friends. It's been too long since I entertained. Eleanor Hartman, social butterfly. Patricia teased, her laughter warm through the phone. What brought this on? Life's too short to spend it alone, waiting for permission to live, I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips. Will you come? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, she declared. By Saturday, my elegant dining room table was set for 8. Patricia and her husband, my old friend Richard, who'd recently been widowed, Daniel and his wife, Michael and me. The children were on a supervised play date with friends, giving Michael a much-needed evening among adults. It felt strange at first, almost alien, hosting again after so many years of quiet solitude. But as the wine flowed and conversation sparked, I felt something profound unfurling inside me, like a long-dormant flower finally turning towards the sun. To new beginnings. Daniel toasted, raising his glass. And old friends, I added, my gaze sweeping across the faces of people who had known me, the real me, all along. Later, as we moved to the living room for coffee, Richard settled beside me on the sofa. It's good to see you like this, Eleanor, he said, his voice warm and gentle. Reminds me of the dinner parties you and Arthur used to throw. You always had a gift for bringing people together. I smiled, deeply touched by the bittersweet memory. It's been too long. Life gets in the way sometimes, he agreed, his gaze distant for a moment. After my Brenda died, I couldn't bear the thought of socializing. But eventually, I realized she wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. That's exactly it, I said softly, a wave of recognition washing over me. I've been existing, not truly living. Trying so hard to stay connected to Michael that I lost touch with everything else that makes life worthwhile. Richard nodded, understanding shining in his eyes. Well, if you're looking to make up for lost time, there's a symphony performance next weekend. I happen to have an extra ticket. I felt a peculiar flutter, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Possibility. I'd like that, I said, a soft warmth spreading through me. Across the room, I caught Michael watching us, a small, knowing smile playing at his lips. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod of approval, a silent testament to our renewed bond. Later that night, after everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Michael found me in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes. I can't remember the last time I saw you laugh like that, he said, picking up a towel to dry. It's been a while, I admitted, a lingering warmth in my chest. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy. He paused, then added, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Richard seems nice. I felt my cheeks warm, a blush I hadn't felt in decades. He's just an old friend, Michael. Michael hummed skeptically. An old friend who couldn't take his eyes off you all evening. I swatted him playfully with the dish towel. Stop it. We're both too old for that sort of thing. You're never too old for connection, he said, his voice suddenly serious, profound. That's one thing this whole mess with Candace has taught me. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't value you. I nodded, understanding completely, the wisdom of his words settling deep within me. When did you get so wise? He bumped my shoulder affectionately, a gesture of easy intimacy. I had a good teacher, even if I was too stubborn to listen for a while. As I climbed into bed that night, I felt utterly different, profoundly lighter somehow, as if I'd finally set down a heavy, invisible burden I'd been carrying for years. The constant, gnawing worry about Michael, the paralyzing fear of being completely cut out of his life, the careful, exhausting dance of trying to help without ever appearing to interfere. All of it had consumed me for so long. Now, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was thinking about my own life again. My own happiness. Not just as Michael's mother, or Arthur's widow, or the secret CEO of Hartman Construction, but simply as Eleanor, a woman with her own desires, her own unique strength, and a wide-open future stretching out before her. The very next morning, I woke early and did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the small, serene lake outside town, a place where Arthur and I used to picnic when we were first married, our love as fresh and bright as the spring air. I sat on the weathered bench that overlooked the shimmering water, watching the sunrise paint the sky in breathtaking shades of pink and gold. I think I'm finally ready to move forward, I whispered into the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves, feeling Arthur's presence, a comforting warmth rather than a haunting void. Ready to build something new. As if in answer, my phone chimed with a text from Michael. Kids want to know if Grandma's making pancakes this morning. I smiled, a full, joyful smile, typing back instantly, on my way home now. Tell them to get the blueberries ready. Home. It was home again, truly home, filled with laughter and love and possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine just a few weeks ago. And I was ready for all of it. 6 months can, indeed, change absolutely everything. As autumn gave way to the crisp embrace of winter, the profound transformation in our lives continued to unfold. Each day brought new challenges, yes, but also unexpected joys. The divorce proceedings dragged on, with Candace fighting every single step of the way. Her initial, outrageous demands had slowly given way to increasingly desperate tactics as her position weakened. When the irrefutable evidence of her affairs and financial misconduct became impossible to deny, she abruptly changed strategies, suddenly casting herself as the ultimate victim of a controlling husband and a manipulative mother-in-law. She's claiming emotional abuse now, Michael told me one evening after the children were tucked into bed. Says I isolated her and monitored her spending. I shook my head, marveling at her sheer audacity. Does she really think that will work? Her lawyer advised against it, he replied, rubbing his temples, clearly weary. But Candace has never been good at taking advice. She's convinced she can still win this. Despite the ongoing, draining legal battle, life in our home had settled into a comfortable, deeply cherished rhythm. Michael had taken a leave of absence from his high-pressure job to focus on Sophie, Leo, and himself, working part-time from home as a consultant. I had officially stepped into the role of CEO at Hartman Construction, no longer hiding behind proxies and figureheads. The announcement had caused quite a stir in the business community. Widow revealed as secret CEO, how Eleanor Hartman built an empire while staying in the shadows, read one particularly dramatic headline. "You're famous, Grandma," Sophie had declared, proudly showing me a newspaper article one of her friends had brought to school. "My teacher says you're an inspiration." The house I had once thought too big, too empty, was now overflowing with life. Leo's toys cluttered the living room floor, a welcome mess. Sophie's vibrant artwork adorned the refrigerator. Michael's laptop and papers spread across the dining table each evening. And I found myself at the very center of it all, no longer relegated to the desolate edges of my son's life, but an integral, cherished part of it. On a crisp December morning, as soft snow dusted the ground outside, I stood in my kitchen preparing breakfast when Michael entered, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. "Everything okay?" I asked, carefully flipping a pancake. He held up a thick envelope. "It just came by courier. It's from Candace's lawyer." I slowly put down the spatula, my heart rate quickening with a familiar dread. "What does it say?" "I haven't opened it yet," he admitted, his gaze troubled. He took a deep, fortifying breath, then tore open the envelope and quickly scanned the contents. Slowly, a look of profound disbelief spread across his face, then something akin to relief. "She's dropping the custody fight," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, laced with shock. "She's agreed to supervised visitation only twice a month." I stared at him, stunned. Why would she give up now, after fighting so hard? "Because of this," he said, handing me another paper from the envelope. It was a grainy photograph of Candace with a man I didn't recognize, both boarding a private jet. She's been living with him in Miami for the past month. According to the investigator, she missed her last 3 scheduled court appearances because she wasn't even in the state. I sat down heavily, processing this truly astounding information. She's abandoned her own children. Michael nodded, a complex mix of emotions, relief, anger, sadness, even a faint flicker of pity, crossing his face. "The lawyer says she's willing to sign over all parental rights in exchange for a lump sum payment and an agreement that I won't press criminal charges for the financial theft. Are you going to agree?" I asked, my voice soft. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly conflicted. "Part of me wants to see her face consequences for what she did. But another part just wants this over with. For the kid's sake." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand, offering silent support. "Whatever you decide, Michael, I'll support you." In the end, Michael chose peace over retribution. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks later. Full custody to Michael, a reasonable payment to Candace that was far less than she'd initially demanded, and the sale of the house they had shared. "What will you do with the money from the house?" I asked as we signed the final paperwork at Daniel's office, a sense of closure washing over us. "Put it in a trust for the kids," Michael replied without a moment's hesitation, his priorities clear. "It's their future, not mine." Daniel smiled approvingly. "I can help set that up. And Eleanor, now that this is settled, we should discuss your estate planning as well." I nodded, a decision I'd been contemplating for months finally crystallizing with absolute certainty. "Yes, Daniel. There are definitely changes I want to make." That evening, while Sophie and Leo played joyfully in the backyard, Michael and I sat on the porch, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands against the crisp winter chill. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking a comfortable, companionable silence. "We should move out. Find our own place." I felt a sudden, unexpected pang of disappointment, though I tried desperately not to show it. "Oh, well, of course, if that's what you want. This arrangement was always meant to be temporary." "No, Mom. You misunderstood, he clarified quickly, a gentle smile playing on his lips. I meant we should all move together. This house, it's full of memories, wonderful ones. But maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new for all of us. I looked at him, completely surprised, my heart fluttering. You want us to continue living together? He nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. Unless you'd rather have your space back. I know we've invaded your quiet life pretty thoroughly. Invaded? I laughed, the words so utterly at odds with how I felt, how filled my life now was. Michael, having you and the children here has been the greatest joy of my life. I was just afraid you might want more independence. We've had enough separation in this family, he said firmly, his gaze steady, earnest. Sophie and Leo adore you. And, honestly, Mom, I don't know what I would have done these past months without you. We're a team now. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. I'd love that. A new home for all of us. We found the perfect place 2 weeks later. A spacious house with a large, vibrant yard, close enough to the children's school and my office, with a separate wing that gave me my own private space, while keeping me connected to the heart of the family. Michael insisted on paying half, using his consulting income. It's not about pride anymore, he explained when I tried to wave away his contribution. It's about partnership. We're building this new life together, Mom. Equal partners. The day we signed the papers for the new house, I finalized another equally important document with Daniel, my new will. Unlike the division Candace had expected, where my assets would go to her and Michael with nothing for me, this will meticulously reflected our new reality. My estate would now be divided equally between Michael and my grandchildren, with significant provisions for their education and future. Moving day arrived in early spring. As I stood in the empty living room of the house Arthur and I had shared for 40 years, a lifetime of memories washed over me. Michael taking his first steps across this very floor. Arthur's booming laugh echoing from the kitchen. Years of joyful Christmas mornings and boisterous birthday celebrations. And the quiet, lonely evenings after they were both gone from my life. Ready, Mom? Michael asked from the doorway, Sophie and Leo peering around him curiously, their faces alight with anticipation. I took a deep breath, a final, fond farewell to the past, and nodded, a serene smile on my face. Ready. Our new home welcomed us with bright, open spaces and a boundless sense of possibility. We spent that first weekend unpacking and arranging, slowly, lovingly, making the house truly our own. Richard came by with a housewarming gift, a beautiful windshield for the back porch, and stayed for dinner, his easy conversation and warm laughter fitting seamlessly into our newly formed family circle. That night, after the children were finally asleep and Michael had retired to his room, I sat alone on the new back porch, listening to the gentle, melodic sound of Richard's windshield dancing in the soft spring breeze. The stars above seemed especially bright, as if they were celebrating with us. My phone buzzed with a text. Patricia, how's the new place? I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, typing back, it feels like home already. Her response came quickly. Of course it does. Home isn't a place, Eleanor. It's the people you share it with. She was right, of course. So profoundly right. For years, I had clung desperately to the past, to the physical reminders of what my family had been. I had tried to buy my way into Michael's life, silently supporting him financially while accepting meager emotional scraps in return. But real connection couldn't be purchased. Real family couldn't be maintained through secret bank transfers and silent, hidden sacrifices. It required honesty, vulnerability, and the fierce courage to speak difficult, uncomfortable truths. The path to where we were now had been excruciatingly painful. There had been moments of heartbreak so acute, so devastating, I genuinely thought I might not recover. But through it all, something far stronger, far more resilient, had emerged. A relationship with my son built on mutual respect and genuine understanding, not obligation or subtle manipulation. And beyond that, I had reclaimed myself. No longer just someone's mother or widow, but Eleanor, a woman with her own identity, her own strength, her own vibrant future stretching out before her. The house Candace had coveted so desperately was finally sold. The insidious control she had wielded over our family was utterly broken. The dark secrets that had kept us isolated from each other were exposed to the healing light and air, allowing true recovery to finally begin. I looked up at the vast, star-dusted sky once more, feeling a profound, encompassing sense of peace settle over me. The fortune I had hidden for so long was now being used openly, honestly, to build something infinitely more valuable than any material possession, a family bound by genuine love and truth, not by secrets and suffocating obligation. In the end, what Candace had so utterly failed to understand was that the true wealth was never in the house, or the bank accounts, or the designer clothes. It was in the deep connections we built, the trust we painstakingly earned, the unwavering love we shared. And that was something no one could ever take away from us again. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. If you were in my shoes, faced with such a profound betrayal, what would have been your very first move after that restaurant incident? Or have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to fight for the truth in your own family? Share your thoughts below. I'm reading every single comment.